Thanks so much for having me here, Bernhard, and for making allowances. I just joined like half an hour ago because I'm at another conference in the City Hall for Cultural Heritage and New Technologies. So I'm doing double duty, but I have other colleagues here, and I'll introduce what we'll be talking about today. And I'll try to keep it to about 40 minutes or thereabouts, since I think we're already a little bit over time and people are probably tired. So today we'll be talking about Semantic Wikibase as a kind of panel discussion. We'll share some experiences of the origin of this extension developed by Professional.wiki with our speaker Jeroen here today. And I'll talk a little bit about what we've been doing with this extension at the TIB, where myself and my colleague Kolja work. And unfortunately, our additional colleague Thorsten Weid from the University of Greifswald cannot join today. Last minute family issue, he apologizes, but I can do a bit of a also intro to what he was going to talk about. So we'll start off the panel with a couple of 5-minute impulse presentations by the speakers, and then I will act as a moderator during a brief Q&A amongst ourselves, and then we would really like to, as soon as possible, open to the audience so we can have an interaction. So we will be talking about Semantic Wikibase, and I'll introduce what it is exactly, but Jeroen very appropriately told me I should first maybe talk a little bit about Wikibase. And before I even jump there, I should probably do a little, as a kind of panel convener, maybe talk a little bit about who we are. You may have already seen our bios on the program, or you probably know Jeroen and Kolja from other presentations, but I'll say who I am. My name is Lozana ROSSENOVA. I am currently product manager for Wikibase services at the Open Science Lab. This is a lab within TIB Hannover. TIB Hannover is a German National Library of Science and Technology. It's a public institution in Germany, and we typically develop open source software there. There are other people here in the room today from TIB as well, so I'm sure you'll probably meet more of us along the conference. And we have been using different MediaWiki technologies for a while. I specialize a bit more in Wikibase. We have colleagues here who specialize more in Semantic Mediawiki. And we thought, why not bring this whole together? And we have had a long history of collaboration with Professional.wiki through collaborative projects, commissions, etc. So we thought, great to also talk to Jeroen alongside ourselves. So what is Wikibase? Sorry if this is like very familiar to everyone, but I'll try to do it super quick, just as a kind of playing level field for everyone. Wikibase, of course, is the free open source software code base behind Wikidata, and I see some colleagues here from Wikimedia Germany, so that's also nice, and I'm sure you've probably met them already. Wikidata, as you probably know, is the public knowledge base behind the Wikipedia project, so it holds all the data that is then displayed in Wikipedia. And Wikibase is a software released by Wikimedia Germany, and then further developed by a whole wide big community of developers, very similar to the Semantic Mediawiki community that I think most of you here are probably more familiar with that community. And we have been talking with Bernhard and other members of the Semantic Mediawiki community for a while about kind of maybe bringing the two communities together. So today I'm going to try to do a little bit of that as well, bringing the Wikibase community closer. So very quickly, I was asked also to kind of talk a little bit about the data model behind Wikidata, so I'm going to show this literally 1-minute video. Here I am searching for the TIB in Wikidata, and I will highlight a couple of important things here. We can see that Wikidata structures information in the form of statements. Statements can have different data types, like geocoordinates or other items in Wikidata, as we've seen. Important also for people working in research and libraries, we have external identifiers. This is another data type that allows us to interconnect knowledge bases. And here we see the link to Wikipedia, where we can get plain text and data intermixed in the same presentation space. And one thing that, you know, as people working in research that we're not so keen on always putting all of our data in Wikidata is that technically you can add fake statements like this, country France. I mean, I could just publish this. Of course, it will be removed soon by, you know, a community of editors and bots who clean up fake statements, or let's say untrue statements. But, you know, still the risk is there. So a lot of people who are in research like to use Wikibase as an alternative to Wikidata, or as a thing that you can then further connect to Wikidata. Wikibase, as you can see here, looks pretty much the same as Wikidata if you do not add any additional layers of interfaces on top of it. You can create new items, and you can create new properties in there which make up your statements. This is also another thing that's a little bit different. from Wikidata, we can make our own properties easily without needing community community consensus. And here what I was showing is that in our Wikibases, typically you can only edit if you're logged in already. And this is an example of an extension that we've built. It's an RDF extension built by Professional.wiki for the Wikibase stakeholder group, including the TIB. And yeah, there's basically some differences here that we've already started developing thanks to the fact that Wikibase is open source and we can develop additional extensions on top of it. So a little bit more about the data model itself. What does it actually look like? So this is the Wikidata and Wikibase combined data model. If you don't add anything extra to Wikibase, this is what you'll get out of the box. You have at the top a label for your item. Typically this label would be also if it's Wikidata represented in a page in Wikipedia. You have a unique identifier that allows you to have multilinguality. So Q42 would be always the identifier for Douglas Adams, regardless if we're looking at Douglas Adams in English or in German or in any other language. We have statements that contain properties, different from the properties in Semantic Mediawiki typically. And we have values that are associated with these properties. And these values, as mentioned already, can have different kinds of data types. They can be other items in Wikidata. They can be numerical values, they can be dates, geo coordinates, all sorts of things. And this data type situation also can introduce actually some difficulties when we're trying to interconnect the Wikibase extension with Semantic Mediawiki, for example, and we'll hear more about that soon. Other things that are important to say maybe is the fact that we can have qualifiers. So this is like statements on top of statements. This is quite useful when you want to make more complex data structures, but it's not very useful when you want to have efficient querying that we've seen with Kolja in Semantic Mediawiki extension. Also useful for researchers, we can have references. This is something that research people really like, that we can add information about where things are coming from. So all well and good. This is so far great. We really like using Wikibase, and it's allowing researchers and beyond, really. My own background is cultural heritage, so anyone working in cultural heritage, whether it's a GLAM institution like a museum, library, or an archive, or whether it's a university, we have been using Wikibase for various use cases. This is what I consider, I think, fairly uncontroversially to be the first Wikibase public instance outside Wikidata. This is the Rhizome Artbase archive of NetArt. This was the project I worked during my PhD on. And while I love working on Wikibase on this project, we did encounter a lot of limitations. For example, we wanted to represent artwork records that were fairly complex and contained a lot of data, like this fun thing here, which is an early piece of net art called Untitled Scrollbars by a Dutch artist. And what is fun about this piece is that obviously we want to have a presentation that includes multiple images. We wanted to interlink this artwork to its multiple variations. We wanted to have text descriptions about the artwork and some, more additional descriptive metadata. And this should, not be too complicated to do, but actually you'll be surprised how complicated it was to do with just Wikibase alone and no other, interface on top of it. So in the end, we did use a custom skin on top of it and an enormous amount of custom Lua scripts. This is something not at all easily replicatable and a complete pain to update, so I do not recommend this to anyone. 3 years after my PhD, postdoc in the TIB, working with amazing people like Kolja, we have obviously learned from our lessons, and we have started developing things like the extension on top of a Wikibase that uses also Semantic Mediawiki as a skin, beyond the skin, more like an interface layer with additional skins that we can modify further and have super nice interfaces that allow us to do fun things, like this research website portal for a project in University of Greifswald. This is what my colleague Torsten was going to talk about, so I can't fully represent everything, but before I hand over to Jeroen and Kolja, I'll just showcase this a little bit. You can also access it at wb.manorhouses.tibwiki.io. I think if you access it right now without being logged in, it might look a little bit funky, but typically with the login, it looks and functions correctly. What we see here is like completely custom designs. We see pages that pull data from the Wikibase with the Semantic Mediawiki syntax. We have very nice long-form presentations of research texts, which was impossible virtually to do with Wikibase alone until now. So I'll just show one of these. So this again, a kind of really cool map that we have, and I'll just show one of these long form articles essentially about one house. These are data info boxes, essentially pulling data from the Wikibase. And here we can see just really nicely presented long text with references. And if I have more time, I can also show some points where we're integrating 3D media, also via our 3D extension for Wikibase. So we have like lots of customizations here, and Kolja can probably talk a little bit more about those in detail because he was the lead developer behind this fully customized site. What's really fun to maybe also show is that thanks to the fact that we still have fundamentally one database below this whole thing, it's just the Wikibase main database that obviously has a Sparkle endpoint. We can do fun things like display embedded queries from the Wikibase in the nicely designed web portal. For example, we can look for people that are connected to these houses. Here I'm doing a federated query with Wikidata and commons, pulling information about the people who own these houses, which I don't care about to have in my own Wikibase. So I'm, referring to these people in Wikidata that allow me to hook further to a historical database maintained in Germany at the University of Vienna called FactGrid. It has a lot of really good historical information about people. So I'm kind of doing, like really nice things here with just very little code, and also some kind of cool visualizations of, we can ask nice questions to our database to show us things like, show me all the houses that are built after 1750, for example, and only those, we don't want more. Or show me all the houses that are within the range of 50 kilometers of this one specific city. So anyway, lots of like cool potential to explore. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Jeroen actually, because he will tell us a little bit more about the main principles of how the Semantic Wikibase extension came about. I don't know if you want to use my machine or you want to plug in yours. Or
you can keep this up and maybe switch to the data models.
Yes, great.
All right, so hello everybody. We are talking about Semantic Mediawiki on this panel. So what I will be doing now during the next 3 to 5 minutes is explain to you what is this thing, what can it do for you, and how did we end up there. So most of you already know me. I'm Jeroen DE DAUW. I've been a maintainer of Semantic Mediawiki for about 15 years now, and I'm also the main software developer behind the Wikibase software. My company provides services around all things Mediawiki, and that of course includes both Mediawiki and Semantic Mediawiki and Wikibase. And that's how we ended up creating this new extension because well, Wikibase itself is great for publishing datasets, but unlike Semantic Mediawiki, it does not have inline queries. It does not have these built-in visualizations. And Lozana already showed some excellent examples of what you can do with this extension. So I found myself thinking, well, we have people that want to use Wikibase and they want to have this kind of visualizations which are present in Semantic Mediawiki. So why don't we connect the two together and get the best of both worlds? So that's what we did. We created the first and so far only extension that's both a Wikibase extension and a Semantic Mediawiki extension, and that's this Semantic Wikibase. Yeah, so Semantic Wikibase is a one-way direction between Wikibase and Semantic Mediawiki. So it allows moving the data that is inside of Wikibase and making it available inside of Semantic Mediawiki as well. The main benefit there is that you get access to all these inline queries and result visualizations, be it simple tables, be it dynamic things such as maps and so on. And you can also combine this data then with whatever is stored inside of Semantic Mediawiki itself. And this extension is free and open source. It's available on GitHub. There's also a demo video on there. I can link this later on the conference chat and put it in on the page of the panel. And yeah, we created this extension as a prototype a few years ago, so it had various limitations. For instance, we are supporting about 10 different Wikibase Semantic Mediawiki data types, but we didn't support geospatial shapes, we didn't support the tabular type of Wikibase, and we didn't support EDTF, which stands for Extended Datetime Format. Another limitation has to do with the Wikibase data model here. So the data that we're synchronizing from Wikibase to Semantic Mediawiki, it includes the things that you see on the top. So it includes the label, it includes the ID, also the description and the aliases. But then when it comes to the statements, so that's where most of your Wikibase data is, we are only synchronizing the property and the main value. So we are did not support qualifiers and references, and also not the rank. So we had a list of ideas of improvements that people could make on top of the initial work that we did. And Kolja over here implemented some of those improvements, such as EDTF support. And that's what he will talk about next. All right, thank you.
I just use it as a background.
Great, yeah.
Okay, thanks. I was a Semantic Mediawiki power user. I was really keen about this technology. I was not active in the community. I was using it for private projects. And when I heard about this extension to bring together Wikibase and Semantic Mediawiki from the beginning, I thought, okay, we need to try this out. And then we had a small pet project where we said, okay, let's try this out. And it worked very well. But there were some limitations for sure, because it was a prototype. So for us, the hardest thing was that it was supporting MediaWiki version 1.35, and we wanted to have a later MediaWiki version. So after we had this first implementation, we said, okay, why not using this technology as a base core for many of our research projects, to say, okay, whenever we have a project where our researchers using a Wikibase and they want to have a front end, maybe we can use Semantic Wikibase for all of these projects. So then we started the process to update this prototype, and as on Wednesday I will have a talk on the details of Semantic Wikibase. I will not only say something about the pros, but also about the cons, because the problem here is that Wikibase and Semantic Mediawiki are not built from beginning to work with each other. There are two separate extensions, and we try to fiddle them together. And during this process, I think this was only possible because we were developing Wikibase for research at this time, which is this automated installation process of MediaWiki. Because to have this both extensions work together, you need to fix a lot of things. So, for example, they are using the name as the same namespace for properties, Wikibase and Semantic Mediawiki. And then there are occurring such things like, okay, if you install Wikibase first, it grabs the namespace, and that's fine. But if you do it the other way around, then Semantic Mediawiki grabs the namespace, and for example, so the order of the installation is normally not a problem with extensions, but here in this specific example, it matters. And if you install Wikibase first, then you have to patch actually Semantic Mediawiki in a small way. So we needed this automated installation process, and then it's fine, because then it's pre-configured and you can just use it. And as our project had an existing Wikibase, which was using extended datetime format and qualifiers, we said, okay, let's give it a try and do a first implementation of that. For EDTF, we saw that it's really a problem to have a full implementation of that, because EDTF have such things like unbounded periods. Like, for example, you can say, I have a period of time, but it's not a fixed period, it's like open in one way, or I just don't know when it began, and that's hard to translate into the Semantic Mediawiki data model. So we started just with a rough implementation where you might lose some data, but if you have simple data, like, okay, I have a fixed period, you can use it. And the same is with qualifiers. If you have existing qualifiers in your Wikibase, you don't want to change the whole data model. Sometimes it's not possible if you have thousands of existing claims. So we came up with a way to use qualifiers within Semantic Mediawiki queries. That makes, so we used sub-objects for this, and that makes the queries then a bit more complicated, but usable. And these are existing discussions that we need to solve, that we cannot solve alone. So we need feedback from the community, we need feedback from the initial developers to come out with a, with a way to good integrate these two extensions. I personally think Semantic Wikibase is really a great combination. Everybody should use it. We should really push this forward, but it needs a lot of effort and further work to make this work. And I think that's a great starting point for the discussion. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much to both of you. Now, Berhard, I don't know how we should handle the phone situation. So we use this and pass it
just
over.
use it and there are two. So
Okay, great. So I will act a little bit as moderator, and I have like 1 or 2 questions for the panel here, and then I want to kind of try to open it up as soon as possible to the round, so we can have a wider discussion. But you know, we've already heard about some limitations from both of you in terms of this is not some complete, fully fledged integration yet. So maybe from Jeroen first, and then from you, Kolja, if you could pick like top 3 things that you think would be most important to develop next to further enhance the integration between Semantic Mediawiki and Wikibase, what would these be? And maybe you can think about concrete use cases if you've had some clients ask you certain things recently. What would be the kind of top 3 things you would yourself pick?
Well, number 1 is very clear, and Kolja already touched upon it, is support for the latest Mediawiki versions. So yeah, not a lot of people want to continue using version 35 of Mediawiki. So that's my number 1. For the additional things, we have several thoughts on things that might be interesting to support in the extension, but it really depends on your use cases. So for instance, you might want to restrict which data that you're synchronizing. You might not want to synchronize all your items and all your properties. You might also want to restrict which things on these items that you're synchronizing. Like you might only want to synchronize statements with certain properties. There's also some things that make it not super production ready. So I'm happy you already derived a lot of value from this extension. But for instance, there is no safeguarding against conflicts of property names. So if you create a property name in Semantic Mediawiki and you also have one of those in Wikibase, then something is going to go wrong. Yeah. And what can be very interesting in this panel is to hear from the people in the audience here what comes to your mind when you see this, what is most important to you, and does already something stand out as missing to you?
Great.
Yeah, also I agree. Versioning is the first thing I would wish for. We brought this to Mediawiki version 1.39, so the latest LTS version, and we were not able to push it further because then you have dependency errors that we could resolve, but I mean everything is possible in IT, but we have a lot of time. Then secondly, EDTF I think needs more support because there are a lot of usage or use cases for these datetime formats. And the latest is we made some prototyping how to support the classic Mediawiki categories together with Semantic Media and Wikibase, because then you have better support, for example, in page forms, like for example, creation of the category tree as a tree component, and it's possible to do that, but you need it somehow manually creating this category tree and all the category pages. If we get better support for this, I think a lot of people will enjoy this feature.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I also just wanted to show this link that Jeroen suggested I show also, which shows the supported property types, just in case people are interested. We can consult this. Yeah, but in general, thank you both for the answers. And indeed, I'm also curious to hear what the audience thinks. One more question I wanted to raise, and this is a little bit like I should say I on purpose did not tell them what questions I'll ask, so they can see what they can come up with. But something as a, let's say, I consider myself first and foremost a designer translator, aka I'm usually the person who talks between the development team and the clients and trying to figure out how to give the clients what they want while, you know, keeping also the developers from going completely insane. But one thing that I encountered in a lot of our recent projects here in Germany is that we oftentimes need multilinguality, and I have to say I find multilinguality for me is a little bit challenging with Semantic Mediawiki, in the sense that we oftentimes have pages in the main namespace that, you know, they're created for the German content. They're linking to the same items in the Wikibase side of things that has the content for an item like a manor house in German. But then we also have to kind of create new pages with like a different title for the version of the text in English for that same house. And magically somehow the categories work across, and I don't, I'm still, as a person who is coming more from the Wikibase background, I'm still trying to get my head around it. So I wonder if you two have any thoughts about multilinguality and how multilinguality, when you're using the Semantic Mediawiki part, can be made more efficient so that we don't have to have this kind of doubling of pages.
Well, thanks, Kolja. So it's a while since I looked at this, and I do remember if you scroll down on this page, there is a list of IDs I had, and I think one of them had to do with multilinguality.
Mm-hmm.
Is it there somewhere?
Second under properties? Second under properties.
Yeah. Okay, I actually don't remember what I exactly had in mind there, but that's
Translation of item site links.
a notable difference between Semantic Mediawiki and Wikibase is that in Wikibase, by default, you have multilingual descriptions of your items, both the labels and the descriptions. Yeah, we can synchronize that. I don't know how useful it is. I also see a lot of people using Wikibase without this multilinguality, so yeah. Do people actually need this? I don't know.
Yeah, I skipped the mic for a reason, because I don't really have much experience with multilinguality. We encountered these problems in our projects when you have these monolingual text descriptions, that, for example, if you have some of them in German and some of them in English, and you query them in a Semantic Mediawiki query, then you get the description or the label, and behind that the language descriptor like the E or EN. And normally you don't want that, and you need to create special templates to select, okay, in this version of the wiki I just want the German one, or maybe a fallback language. But I still working on getting my head around how multilinguality is actually supported in Mediawiki, and I think, yeah, we need to get better in that to come up with a good solution.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's one of the points where I think we can see where there are some advantages to Wikibase. I think if you just use Wikibase pure, you know, at least some of these questions don't come up, but then you're lacking all of the beautiful visualization and inline queries that you have in Semantic Mediawiki. So I think it's just one of these kind of tricky points about we do need more help from the community to think together about how can we resolve this as a group of people who use maybe one or both or all of the different kinds of extensions. And at this point, I think since it's 6:10, and I guess people are probably looking forward to beers already, maybe we can open the round so everyone can ask us questions. Okay, there's several. And you can also ask me questions. I'm not just a moderator.
Yeah, many thanks for this discussion. Yeah, one aspect was already mentioned, and yeah, if you have statements about statements, so this is an important pattern in science, so because not everything is precisely 100% true, or has a time context. If you translate them, there are two questions. If you translate them to the Mediawiki, do both extensions produce the same RDF afterwards? And besides making querying more complex, do you also deal with performance issues? Because you, of course, you blow up the number of triples you totally have. You provide a lot of statements about the statements in addition.
I don't get the first one. Are there sharing the same what?
So if you translate statements from Wikibase into Mediawiki, Mediawiki can also populate a triple store, like base graph with Wikibase. Do they produce the same RDF after translation to the extension?
So I don't know if they produce the same RDF, but okay.
So actually, I haven't checked this, but so there is this one-way translation from Wikibase to Semantic Mediawiki going on, and we are making some simplifications in the transformation of the data. So some information is getting lost. Originally, we didn't keep the qualifiers at all, and we also talked about data types, such as the extended datetime format, where simplification is needed, but it's also necessary for some of the older formats. So not all of the information is retained in Semantic Mediawiki, so there's going to be differences there. And since we're touching on RDF now and triple stores anyway, let me highlight another benefit of this Semantic Wikibase extension combination that we haven't talked about yet. So for Wikibase, you need BlazeGraph to run queries, and this is like an additional service, right? So it's not as easy to set up as a normal Mediawiki extension. While with Semantic Mediawiki, it has its own mechanism built on top of the Mediawiki database, so you don't need an additional triple store. You can, but you don't need it. So with this combination, you can actually get queries for your Wikibase data without setting up an additional service, so you don't actually need BlazeGraph.
Yeah, and as an extension, when you ask about statements and about the performance, that's where it gets a bit complicated in Semantic Mediawiki, because statements about statements is, for example, when you have dates, like you have a property event, and then you say, okay, I assign an item to that, like the type of the event, like creation or destruction, and then as a quantifier, I can set an actual date. To translate this into Semantic Mediawiki, we can translate the first property, normal, like, okay, it's P1 in Wikibase, and it's also P1 in Semantic Mediawiki. But then, to have the statements about statements, you would need something in Semantic Mediawiki, like I have P1 property to the item of the event, for example Q1, and then the qualifier name, so the date. So you would have something like P1, Q1, P5. And we need actually to virtually create these properties, because when you create your data model, you don't know which combination of events your user will add into your database. So when we translate all this qualifier data from Wikibase to Semantic Mediawiki, we actually create a lot of new properties regarding what the user has entered in Wikibase, and this is creating poor performance in the queries. So yes, there are issues. I think, for example, when we're creating maps, we are able to put 5,000 items in it. But if you use a lot of these property chains in the queries, you're getting poor results.
Okay, so you chain up property chains that condense in a single property to overcome this issue.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add like one thing to what Jeroen was saying, I would say I still feel that for main data operations I would stick to the Wikibase. Okay, hey, I'm biased, but I think the Sparkle querying is just something we don't get with Semantic Mediawiki, and Sparkle, at least in academia, is the standard way to query a knowledge base. And it's the way that you can query multiple knowledge bases and have federation. And we recently, like just this morning at this other conference, we were trying a federation between a community of archaeologists in Germany, community of historians, and our cultural heritage community, and we were able to do it through like an external engine for Sparkle querying, QLever, run from the University of Freiburg, and that has a completely open endpoint there that can, access any Sparkle that you pointed, any other Sparkle endpoint that you pointed to, and yes, it's not very efficient yet. Performance is kind of bad, but at least it's standardized. So anyway, that's my, Wikibase EA prop. I don't know if you want to have a retort to that, or not, or maybe at the bar, or okay, yeah, let's go for it.
I think that's a good point. I think Sparkle is, of course, the most impressive query language, and the Mediawiki query language, of course, lags behind. And it would be great if you could also run Sparkle queries, but get the visualizations from Semantic Mediawiki. It would be really great.
Well, that was going to be my last question for the panel, but I thought I'm going to skip it. It's like, you know, in an ideal world, what else do you want? And I personally want like a much nicer query interface that can span both. Because I think it's nice having the Spark endpoint in the Wikibase, but it's not a nice query service and it's not well visualized. It's very, I would say, high learning curve and a barrier to user adoption. So although I love Spark, yeah, it has its problems, and especially in the implementation we have with BlazeGraph, it's not ideal. But also to your point about statement upon statements, thanks to the experience with Kolja, we have done two things in the Open Science Lab. We have moved away from qualifiers, not only because they are bad for performance in Semantic Mediawiki, but because they also don't allow us to map to, at least in cultural heritage, the event-based model for modeling information called CDOC-CRM. It's like super big in the cultural heritage world. That one actually, it's better to have separate statements, so we actually started creating more items, even for things like the creation event of an object, instead of just shortening it like Wikidata does and saying, okay, this thing, date of creation, blah blah. We say, okay, this thing has an event that is a creation, it has its own queue number, and on top of that queue number we add a normal statement that says the date is blah blah. So we actually kind of skip the qualifier situation, not completely, but in some cases, and we're compliant with some event-based models that tend to be widely used in archives and libraries and stuff like that. And sorry, I shut up. If there are any questions or...
One extension to that, one of the foundings in our project was that when you are using pure Wikibase, people tend to creating the data model so that it looks nice or appears nice in the Wikibase front end. So you use qualifiers because then you see all in one on one page in Wikibase, in the Wikibase front end, not because it's a good way to model them or you decided it's a good way. It's just with, okay, now I have all in one page, I don't have to click somewhere. When you use Semantic Mediawiki and have other ways to display it, then you choose another data model. Yeah, it's no problem then.
Other questions? Or you can talk to us later at the informal meetup.
There's one question there, or not?
Yeah. I'm just wondering how you feel about extension translate for multilinguality. Oh, how do you feel about extension translate when you're dealing with multilingual pages?
What do you mean with extension translate?
The extension called translate. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have any experience with that. So.
It's only for wiki text, not for triple.
Oh yeah, but so I thought the main issue was when you had to link to multiple pages and you have to link to the English version and you have to link to the.
That's one of the issues, but yeah, so we can check out that extension.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Good to see you.